Hello, and welcome back to the Dizzy Diaries podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about chronic conditions, not just from a clinical perspective, but from the inside out. The routines, the planning, and the things that we never see. Today's episode is a really special one because we're talking about a condition that affects someone from birth and shapes their entire life, yet it's rarely spoken about. The condition is Congenital Adrenal Hyperplasia, or CAH for short. And joining me today is someone very close to me, a good friend, Arad. She lives with CAH and she's kindly agreed to share what her life looks like, what her experience has been, and a little bit of a look behind the scenes. Before we jump into Arad's story today, I want to give you a quick overview of what CAH actually is, because for most people this will be the first time they've heard of it, unless of course you've searched for this. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia is a genetic condition that affects the adrenal glands. These glands are responsible for producing cortisol, which helps us to respond to stress, as well as hormones that regulate blood pressure, salt balance, and energy. In CAH, the body can't produce cortisol properly. That means people with CAH rely on lifelong medication to replace what their body can't make. And because cortisol is involved in basically everything and many functions in the body, from illness to stress to surgery and daily functioning, CAH doesn't just show up during flare-ups. It's something that has to be considered every single day and accounted for with lifestyle, medication, and stress levels. Arad, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I know this is a very personal experience for you, living with CAH, and I'm really grateful that you're here and willing to share your experience. So to start us off, before we dive into the practical and the emotional side of things that we kind of spoke about before this, can you tell us on the podcast more about your journey with CAH, when you were diagnosed, and if you remember anything from those early years, even if it's family experiences?
I was diagnosed luckily very early. I was diagnosed at age 4. Specifically with non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia and hypercortisolism. I can't even say it. It's written down. I have like a bracelet, and that's how I know how to pronounce it. But essentially what it is that it's a genetic mutation that impairs the activity of an enzyme called 21-hydroxylase. A result of the condition is that you have quite a large amount of male sex hormones. Similar to PCOS, similar symptoms. You have excessive hair growth, acne, weight gain, irregular periods, issues with fertility. But in addition to that, you also have almost no cortisol in your system. So I was exceptionally lucky that at age 4, my mom started noticing that I was growing pubic hair, and she was like, that's not okay, and found a pediatric endocrinologist here in Cape Town, and he immediately picked it up, which was miraculous because a lot of the time women with this condition are only diagnosed much later in life, during puberty or even after. And by that point, a lot of the symptoms, I guess, like a lot of your skin gives you a lot of trouble, your fertility, you have quite a few fertility issues. So I was really lucky that they picked it up early. After that point, I remember it was just x-rays after blood test after everything. An interesting way of tracking CAH is tracking growth spurts. Again, you're exposed to a lot of testosterone at a young age, so you're going to grow quite quickly. So every few months I'd have to have an x-ray of my wrist, and that would kind of correlate with how old I was. So at a certain age, when I was 10, I had the wrist of a 13-year-old.
Okay, so at that point, like the growth plates in a way.
Exactly. So then the doctor was like, okay, now I understand how to manage your medication to try and bring you back to the same age as your bones, etc. So it was a lot of that, a lot of blood tests. It made me very scared of blood tests. I'm still very terrified of them, and I pass out almost every time. But over time, I understood that why they were important, and it's important to track how you are taking exogenous cortisol. It's essentially steroids, and that is very hard on the body. So it's important to make sure that how much you're taking is perfect for your body. I think it was a very difficult thing for my mom to grasp. I think it was very hard for her having a little girl and not knowing if she'll ever have a period, ever be able to fall pregnant. But she was absolutely a rock and still is through it all. And thankfully, for the past 20 years, I've been completely managed. So that's great.
It is really good thinking about how cortisol affects sort of all of your daily functions, stress, hormones, all of that. And if you don't have that normal production, and you don't realize until you're a lot older when you start having menstrual issues, or as you say, things that your parents don't pick up on. But the fact that your mom was so on top of it really helps. And with conditions like CAH, there's obviously a lot of daily management that's involved in that. So as you mentioned, medication, but aside
Yeah.
from medication or including medication, what does your sort of daily management look like to keep you feeling well?
It's interesting because as you grow older, that management looks different. I mean, year after year, especially through puberty, my dosage of steroid had to change just in order
Yeah.
to ensure that I was growing at the right pace and kind of hitting those milestones of girls my age. Thankfully, I did. But on a normal day, how it looks is that I have to take 15 milligrams of a steroid, 10 in the morning and 5 in the evening. It's essentially to mimic your natural cortisol cycle. So cortisol kind of like wakes you up in the morning. So you have my highest dose then, and then throughout the day it's kind of cyclical, and then I take a bit in the evening, so to kind of bring everything back down to normal. The medication I take specifically, it's a glucocorticoid steroid, so again, it mimics the role of cortisol in the body. It's an anti-inflammatory, all the good stuff that cortisol does for us, not just the bad stuff. So at the same time as that, once I was about 16, I was put on the combined pill because that was also very helpful in suppressing a lot of the male sex hormones like testosterone. So those two together worked very well in helping me regulate my periods, combating a lot of those PCOS type symptoms of terrible cramps, acne, excessive hair growth. And then lastly, the third part of the medication is a strong vitamin D supplement. Taking steroids for a long period of time, it really impacts your bone density. So that's kind of what the 3 main medications I've been taking for most of my life. Well, yeah, from like 16 onwards for the past at least 10, 12 years. However, now that I am trying to fall pregnant, it's a bit tricky because coming off of the pill it would then mean that my daily steroid dosage has to change. It has to go up a bit, which in itself has its own implications on 1, bone density, 2, heart health, 3, just, it's not good to take more than you need. But you kind of need to take enough in order to suppress your testosterone enough so that you can have healthy cycles and try to start that pregnancy journey. So at the moment, I'm taking a medication that is slightly stronger than the one I was on before, just so that I can take it and not have to be on the pill. The impact of that is being 4 times stronger, it's also not as cyclical or doesn't mimic the natural cortisol cycle. I wake up exhausted, I need a nap in the middle of the day, my appetite was completely suppressed for a long time. So it's just kind of getting that balance. It's not a forever thing, it's just for now, but you just kind of have to find the medication that works best for you, and thankfully there's more than one option.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And as more people are coming with awareness to conditions like this and trying to manage it better, and I think for you being a scientist at heart, but also, or by profession, but also having the preventive medicine knowledge that you have working in your health space, you have to think about those future things and what is this doing to my body now, what's happening in the future. But at the same time, you have to remember that you're human and you have to be treated with medication to keep you going now. And it's like finding that balance of, well, how do I preventatively manage everything, but also feel okay now? And also think about children and all of that. And something you said, which was really relevant, is about the stress. We always think cortisol is associated with stress. Something that I read about, and you can elaborate more, is about stress dosing with this type of condition with CAH, and how you manage that around life events, training, illness, travel, anything like that. How do you sort of manage stress dosing? Do you do any preparation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because how we understand cortisol is that it's kind of the antagonist to adrenaline. So we have this system, this pulley system. When your adrenaline goes up, your cortisol tries to bring you back down.
Yeah.
So in times of stress, when your adrenaline starts to go up, let's say you're going on a flight or you're traveling or it's very, very hot outside, or you're very, very ill, you need that little extra of cortisol. And unfortunately, I can't make that naturally. So what I try to do is, when I am sick, for example, with the flu or when I had COVID, I had to double my dose to make sure that I was, even if it felt like it was too much cortisol, rather that than not enough. Just because you don't want to end up going into adrenal stress, and that can be really dangerous, which has happened to me before when I just kind of was very irresponsible, put myself in adrenal stress and was in ICU for a week, which was very scary. So it was also like a learning curve. So now I know when I'm traveling as well, like just go, you might not think it, but going on a flight and landing in a new country and being on your feet for a long period of time and new weather and new foods, it is stressful to the body. And you don't realize that your cortisol is doing a lot of work. You only realize when you don't have any. I always try to prepare for a flight before a flight, and when I land in the new location in the first 2 days, I'll always up my dose, and then when I start to feel a bit more settled, I go back to normal. You also don't want to give yourself too much cortisol because that can make you feel really ill as well. So it's a really tough balance. You have to really read your body, and it's something that you learn over time.
You speak a lot about it in the sense that you're preparing and planning for things, and I think like in the dysautonomia POTS world, we talk about something called pacing, but it's not necessarily medical pacing. It's more pacing of like strategies, making sure you've got rest time, making sure you're preparing. But in a way, even though you're doing medical dosing or increasing or decreasing, you're still thinking about all of those things. When you know you're traveling, when you land, it's very easy to fall into, okay, let's go explore, let's do all these things, where sometimes you need to give yourself grace to think, okay, well, we need some downtime or some time to just settle in. And as humans living in this world, it's so easy to just go, and it's really hard to slow down, and it's fine balance of both when you're trying to be successful and everything. But it's interesting to hear the medication dosing side of things as well. We obviously think about how CAH interacts with the physical world around you and all the things that you're doing, but how do you find that heat and hydration affect you? Do you notice when you don't have enough water, you feel very different? Things like heat now, does your body feel a lot hotter than normal?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, hydration is one of the largest challenges with CAH, because with the condition, your body doesn't produce enough aldosterone, which is a hormone that helps regulate your salt and water balance. So you tend to lose a lot more water and salt than the normal person, which can lead to adrenal failure, which is what I experienced. So because of that, you have to stay hydrated and even, regularly use electrolytes on the daily. Even if it's a normal day, you're just going, sitting at home doing work, electrolytes are on hand because you just tend to be losing more salt than others. With regards to heat, it's just being responsible. As if you're outside the whole day, take water, take electrolytes without fail, don't sit in the sun, be in the shade. Don't put your body into excessive stress unless you've prepared.
Tying into that management, one thing you've done which is amazing is you've done your high rocks, rock games, turf games. You're very good with your training, but also knowing when to pull back. And exercise can be as clinical as we wanted to prescribe by the book, but realistically it needs to be sustainable and enjoyable. So I'd be interested to hear what you find you enjoy with exercise, but also supports your body, and what your schedule looks like for that.
I always thought that because of my condition, I could never do high intensity, crazy events like a high rocks. But then over the years, you learn to train with your body and to your body's best capabilities. And because of the steroids and its impact on my bone density, high impact sports and strength training was strongly recommended. Shifting gears and going into that space, I just had to be responsible. I have to say, how am I feeling today? Always taking electrolytes with me, no matter what. And I just kind of pushed myself to where I knew I could. I would never overdo it. But I kind of got to a point where I found that I could push myself a little bit further if I trained with moderation. Obviously, overtraining is a big no-no for anyone, let alone someone with a chronic condition. Step back and being look, I've trained 4 days this week. I need those 3 days to just recuperate, go for a long walk. The magic of a long walk is underspoken about. It really is.
It's not just training for the sake of now getting your bone density and doing the high intensity exercise. It feels like something you go and enjoy because it ties into mental health as well. You feel like you're going out, you're enjoying, even those long walks are enjoyable, and you can walk along the seaside and it just fills your cup. And sometimes you don't realize it's easy to stay at home, but just going for a walk, doing some exercise does really help. And what do you find that makes the biggest difference for you with family support, medical care, all of that? You've kind of struck this balance where you've got good medication, you've got a good specialist, and you've got a system around you that you're quite well educated on. But what do you find is the biggest difference for you?
Apart from Dr. Grindley, who really did make such a huge difference in all our lives and being so on it and really understanding, my mom is a huge support. The fact that there would be times where the medication I needed was out of stock in certain cities in the country, she would call every single, if you're South African, you know Dis-Chem, you know Clicks, like she would phone every single pharmacy. She would ask friends from different parts of the country to please bring and get for me. Like she was so involved, and so like I'll never forget the day when I went to her and I told her I got my period. Like my mom, she didn't cry that much at my wedding. It was such an emotional. She was so happy, and it was just, so she's just been such a big support. And sometimes she's a bit neurotic about it, and I understand. She saw me at my absolute worst. There were moments where we didn't think I'd make it through, and I understand it's a terrifying thing to see as a parent. I think I like the idea of trying to amaze her with what I can do. So like with High Rocks, like she was just like, I can't believe you've done that, like given what you have. I think another huge support is my husband. He from day one, my mom said to him, I don't care who you are and what your story is, as long as you make sure she drinks enough water, that's all I care about. And he's succeeded in every aspect of that. He won't let me move without a bottle of water and electrolytes, and he's very good at reading when I'm not okay and when I'm having a rough day, and he's like, maybe you should double your dose, or like, you're really sick, I know you're trying to be brave and not take more meds, but you are ill and you need to look after yourself. So he's been a huge support. And I think the lastly is this community that you're trying to create of people coming together that, we might not all have the same chronic condition, but we get it. There's something about living with something that you have to be more hyper aware of your body, and knowing that I could come to you and talk to you about it, even though our conditions are so different and I'm still learning so much about yours every day. I think this community you're building and the people involved that's a support that I never thought I would have, because I've very rarely spoken to someone with my condition. So even to just engage with people who have some sort of other condition is so empowering, and I'm really grateful for it.
I'm so glad that you found it helpful, because that's the whole point of community. Is it's so easy to get stuck in this bubble of, I'm managing this condition, I have my specialists, I have my parents, I have people that know what's going on, but you don't always have the people that are going through it themselves. And one of the things reading about your condition and other conditions that people have is, it's not necessarily just a flu or a cold, or it's not like, okay, rest for 2 weeks. It's now like, okay, we're thinking decades, we're thinking months, we're thinking what happens for the rest of my life. And it's a lot of pressure on a person to think, well, I'm going to be different to someone else, or I'm going to have to eat differently or manage my water intake, and just think, well, why do I have to do it if other people don't? And that comparison comes in, which is easy to get into a negativity loop. But sometimes I like to think of it as like, it's your unique superpower, and it's your thing that sets you apart, but also empowers you to be better at what you do, and probably even better clinical care and scientific care of people, because you're on a level where you understand patients and you can be like, well, I know what you're going through and I want to make sure you get the best experience. And creating a community makes a huge difference in a world where everything's virtual and we don't really have access to friendships and things like that every single day. It's really good to have something to go back to. So it's really good to hear you've had that with your mom, with this community, like with your husband, and the fact that he can pick up on small subtle hints of like, hey, something's not right today, just makes you feel like, okay, well, I don't have to do everything, I don't have to bear all the responsibility.
I find as well that like people who have a chronic condition are the most self-aware of their bodies than anyone else, and I agree with you, it's absolutely a superpower. The fact that you can you're sitting at your desk and you suddenly feel like, oh, something feels a bit strange, like you know yourself so well, and you create this like advocacy for yourself. So when you ever go to a specialist or you're trying a new specialist, and you can kind of be firm and say, this, I know what I have and I'm empowered by what I have. And a lot of the time you can go to a specialist, they'll be like, oh, I haven't actually worked with someone in your condition. And I'll be like, well, let me tell you. There was one time I went to, and my current endocrinologist, he's amazing, but obviously I had to transition from pediatric to normal because I grew up. And I remember sitting with him and he asked what I studied, and I told him, I'm a medical biochemist, and he was like, oh, so why are you here? You can tell me more about your condition than I ever could. Which was so empowering for me, because I was like, yes, I can. But it also helps because now I felt like him and I could work as a team. It wasn't like me sitting there and just obeying a doctor's orders. We could have a discussion. I could ask him questions. We could try to figure out answers together.
now that you've got this good doctor's approach, and it sounds like he's taking that MDT approach of thinking about everyone that needs to be involved, there's obviously a level of respect from his side as well. When you go see a doctor, it's so easy to have that hierarchy of, well, I'm coming into your office, you've got this authority and power, and I need to convince you that I'm unwell or something like that. And even if you have a diagnosis, you can often go into a room and feel quite intimidated. And from his side, the fact that he turned around and said, well, you know more about this, or you could tell me, and let's go on this journey together, is so empowering. And it's a really good feeling to have someone respect you as a patient, because it makes you feel like I'm heard and I can do this. I'm on this journey and I can do it. And when you have tough days, you can be like, everything's going to be okay. And that leads on to the last question, which is about workplace, healthcare, doctors, friends, and what you think the world still needs to learn or maybe do better, even if it's just your personal experience. Are there any things that people could improve on with CAH?
I mentioned to you before that is absolutely crazy to me is that I have never met anyone that has what I have, other than my brother, but he can't relate. The first time I caught a glimpse of someone who had it, I was watching like a TLC show about mom and daughters who are like too close to each other. Like, you know, like there's the mom and son one, it's the same. And she was this beautiful girl, and she was like talking to the camera, and she was like, oh, I have congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And I was like, oh, what? There's another one. I was like, there's another one of me. And she was talking about her treatment, and I was like, same. I love that. But I'm yet to find one here. But I think when it comes to like what there still is to learn, for me personally, what I feel like I've been trying to do a lot of research on my side, research on like long-term studies on the impact of steroids on cardiovascular health, specifically in individuals. So for example, I mean, I've been taking steroids since I was 4. Again, not a like dangerous amount, but still I feel like taking exogenous medication for almost like 30 years is just a very long time. And I'd love to know the impact of that on my health, on, you know, in other individuals who have CAH, like what does that look like on our heart health, on our diabetes health, like, you know, just in general. I think the main message, I guess, that's coming out of this, and I think it's something that your podcast like really pushes for, is that like empowerment through knowledge. If you truly understand, it doesn't have to be to the biochemical level. You don't have to understand the exact gene or the exact like mechanism of action of this one enzyme. Like you don't have to, but in order to just know what's going, it's like, again, like with understanding your menstrual cycle, once you have that knowledge, it's so empowering. And I feel like then you can make way more informed decisions, and you just feel so much more in touch with yourself, that you can be an advocate for yourself, which I think this platform really exemplifies. And it's so empowering for me to see you do that, because you have such an incredible grasp on your condition. I mean, you've written like books about it, which I'm a huge fan of. Everyone go buy them. They're amazing.
Thank you.
Go check them out on Amazon.
And I think learning to look after yourself, maybe it's better now in the younger generation, but looking after yourself, advocate for yourself, have conversations with doctors, tell people when you're not feeling well. We often put ourselves on the bandwagon, we look after everyone else. So it's a really hard skill to get. But once someone informs you, gives you information, doctors nowadays, depending where you are in the world, don't always have the capacity to teach you as well as prescribe. So they'll listen to your problem, have 20 minutes to diagnose, make a decision, and give you medication and trial and error. But they don't have the time to give you information and say, well, how can we make you feel more empowered or manage your condition? And what do we look at outside of medical management? And there'll be a few doctors that do that, but a career coach recently said to me that, you know, TikTok, Instagram, all of that, it's becoming more like a search engine in a way. People are searching certain catchphrases on these social media platforms because people make videos and people share ideas, and there's such a level of support people need that's being missed. And there will be certain websites that can help, but realistically, when you're in a state of being unwell, it's really hard to say, well, how do I actually implement that? You can read 10 guidelines online and be like, well, how do I actually do this? But it is trial and error and speaking to the right people. And to your point of having other people in the world with this condition, just having a group to say, well, okay, we're in the right place. We've tried this, we've tried that. This has worked, this hasn't worked. And that's what I'm trying to create. And it sounds exactly what we need for CAH, is to say, well, how do we create this awareness and support? and hopefully your doctor now has a better understanding to apply to anyone else that walks through the door. Exactly what you said about seeing the lady on TLC is you had this feeling of, I'm not alone, there's someone else, I'm not the only one in the world. And it's so easy to feel alone or be like, question, am I crazy, am I just experiencing this, is this real? And when you don't have doctors, friends, support on your side, it's easy to reinforce that thought in your head and go into a negative spiral. So it's good that you've surrounded yourself with the right people. And I think an important message as well is what you said about putting in the legwork to find the right person. And if it's not the right person, it doesn't fit, get a second opinion if you've got the access to it. Look at, community forums, speak to people, try get on a support group or WhatsApp group, just so that you can speak to people and say, well, this is my experience. Am I justified? Just do sort of the scientific research yourself, which takes a lot of effort. But when you get to the point of, okay, this makes sense, I understand this, I've tried this is working, this isn't working, you can go back to a new doctor and say, well, we've done all of this is what my initial opinion was, and this is what I think it is, can we run additional tests? And some of them will be receiving to that, some of them won't. But you have to advocate for yourself, and it's really discouraging when you see a doctor that's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine, or whatever, and you're like, well, sometimes it's not just in, the quantitative assessments, but it's the qualitative as well. Looking at things like sleep trends, exercise trends. When have you done really well with exercise? Have you changed anything in your nutrition? And becoming educated but not obsessed with it is really a good takeaway there.
If you sleep well, eat well, and you have good friends, and you're in the sun, you'll be fine.
Definitely.
That's not a medical advice. I think having a chronic condition and now being in this world of optimizing and longevity, I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of just like a big FU to people with chronic conditions, because we're like, okay, well, it's so nice that you can now just optimize one or two markets. We're just trying to survive. And sometimes I need 9 hours of sleep to survive. I'm not going to wear a weird mask and sleep in a special bed and do all these things and have like these drinks in the morning. Sometimes I can't do that.
And it's so easy in this world to get obsessed with those. But your body needs nutrition, it needs fuel, it needs sleep, it needs exercise, it needs all of these things in ways that are accessible to you. And everybody's picture looks different. That's why we can look at science, and with patients and clients that I see, I can say, well, the research says this, but that's great. That's 5% of the picture. What does your day look like? What does your lifestyle look like? What do your friends do? What are you doing? What is your work? And then it's like, well, what do you actually enjoy? And how do we build a picture based on that? And often we have to do that for ourselves. But if you can have a community that's supporting or just learn along the way, it really helps. We're going to get everyone sort of looking at the pillars of health rather than optimizing too much, and looking at quality of life. Obviously quantity is going to be increasing as medicine gets better and better, but having the quality in those years, and this idea of longevity improving just the quality and your happiness and how well you live rather than just how long you live. And I think there is a shift towards that now, but there's sometimes a misconception with what longevity means.
I feel like longevity should be the byproduct of your lifestyle, not the goal. It's one day at a time. Especially with a chronic condition, one day at a time. Don't think about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next year, July, like, I don't know, I'm ready for Christmas. Don't even think about it. One day at a time. Take your meds, drink water, and go outside. That's it.
I just like the way you said that, because it's so easy to get caught up in the big life changes. And one thing you've done really well with me as a friend is to say, well, all the small things we celebrate. Did you have water today? Did you have lunch? What did you like? And we always have those
Kit Kat Mondays.
Yeah.
Always have a Kit Kat on a Monday.
So for those of you who don't know or haven't seen it on Instagram, I have this habit of Kit Kat Mondays, and now it's just gone forward with both of us, and we just love it because we have a Kit Kat on a Monday, and it starts your week. Instead of saying, let's wait for the weekend, let's wait for something special to celebrate Monday, and the rest of the week will just be looking up from there. Like, it's a good way to start the week. So if you haven't done anything this week and you've not prepared for next week, start with a Kit Kat Monday and just see how it goes. So nice to have this insight and speak to someone else, and like have the first guest officially on the podcast, and we'll see where it goes.
Flattered.
Yeah, and we'll probably find a lot more people with CAH that are in similar boats to you, hopefully, that have felt like they need more support or need their awareness, and and other scientists coming together and eventually just having more research and saying, well, what do we actually do with people and how do we make this better?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I listen to your podcast all the time, like especially if I'm a little bit anxious. I remember I was on a flight recently and it was really stressful and scary because the turbulence was mad. And the first thing I thought was put on a Dizzy Diaries podcast, because the music, firstly, is so soothing, but just your voice and also the things you speak about, but like the breathing techniques, it's been so helpful for me whenever I'm like just feeling a little bit like, But it's been an absolute honor to be your first guest, and I hope this is the first of many.
Arad, thank you so much for trusting me and the listeners with your story. You've given such a clear, honest insight into what it means to live with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, not just medically, but practically and emotionally from your side. If you're listening and this is the first time you've heard of CAH, I hope this episode has helped you understand that rare doesn't mean insignificant, and invisible doesn't mean easy. As always, if this episode resonated with you, please share it, rate it, or send it to someone who might benefit from hearing it. Awareness starts with conversation. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Dizzy Diaries.